also want to say thank you to OIA and OR for having us be here and giving me the panel to present this research. And thank you to my wonderful panelists for being up here with me today. So as Jennifer mentioned, I'm about to graduate from Portland State University in just a few weeks here. I'm a double major in marketing and supply and logistics management with a certificate degree in the athletic and outdoor industry. And I also pursued the university honors track that we have at PSU. Part of the honors college requirements is to conduct your own research, which is the thesis that I will be presenting to you guys today. My ideas that I have in this research have been informed from the industry throughout, and I want to let you know that this research is continually ongoing right now. We just recently wrapped up a national survey that had over 185 respondents. I got funded through the Institute of Sustainable Solutions at Portland State University to be able to conduct that. And I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview about what that research went into, some of the insights that I was able to pull from that research, and then open this up for discussion with our panelists here today. So I hope that this conversation definitely helps to reaffirm some thoughts about consumer preference for different aspects of sustainability and shed some light onto why I'm approaching this topic with such an intensive consumer focus. My classes definitely focused on marketing within the athletic and outdoor industry and emphasized corporate social responsibility as a means for companies to connect with consumers and set higher standards for themselves and meet expectations from consumers that are consistently growing right now. Sustainability is a massive focus within this industry, and one of my big takeaways after going through some classes and learning more about corporate social responsibility is why companies aren't necessarily communicating aspects of corporate social responsibility as it relates to products or the innovation that they are pursuing upfront within a lot of their communication. Given that corporate social responsibility can encompass so many different aspects of innovation and directions within a business, it's easy for consumers to sometimes get lost, but at the same time, as I mentioned, there's baseline expectations that companies are being responsible and meeting needs not only for themselves, but also for the environment. Outside of the specific demand for sustainability, we do know that consumers are looking for durability, comfort, and quality within this industry, and I wanted to research how sustainability can play an important role in meeting some of these aspects that companies are looking to meet for consumers within products. My perspective as a student who's certainly a little bit environmentally sensitive and likes to see innovation in products that is more eco-friendly certainly left me wondering why I wasn't seeing more information about sustainable attributes of products from companies that I was buying from. I know that I can certainly dig into corporate social responsibility reports, but what I really wanted to understand was why they aren't discussing that up front and what the risk is that is involved with discussing sustainability. I analyzed about 20 secondary sources with my research and started to feel grounded in some of the barriers and drivers as to why consumers would be looking to make a purchase based off the environment. I also left myself feeling a little bit perplexed about the lack of focus within academia as to why researchers weren't currently looking at different aspects of sustainability and how consumers are preferring these different aspects specifically. Price is still a big barrier to overcome for a lot of different brands right now. We know that doing something right is going to cost more, and some consumers just simply aren't willing to pay for that. But the really interesting thing that I found within a lot of academic research is a lot of conflicting information as to what the drivers for being willing to purchase based off of an environmental factor would be. Several papers suggest that a desire to consume in a more sustainable manner may be due to concern for the environment or the simple functional attributes of a green product. However, on the other hand, some research is arguing that egoistic values, such as sense of accomplishment towards a bigger goal, self-esteem, might play a larger role than responsibility, protecting the planet, and social justice all combined. Further, consumers tend to make associations about sustainable and eco-friendly products, meaning that they might be more gentle, and some research suggests that they're perhaps even weak. However, this doesn't necessarily align with the values that consumers are looking for within this industry, especially for durability. Although I found this conflicting information, this did start to explain some of the risk that's involved with discussing sustainability. Compliance issues have plagued organizations for many years, and claims about sustainable benefits tend to be put under a microscope. However, research does certainly inform that liability can be overcome with explicit information about strength-related attributes of products. Further, consumers do, especially younger consumers like the millennials and Gen Zs, do have more willingness to pay for sustainable benefits within products. But the attitudes that they have don't necessarily line up with the purchase behaviors that they end up making. I knew that finding that the reasoning behind this attitude behavior gap could be explained by a lot of different moderators, so my research really dove into what consumers think about different aspects of sustainability to see if there's a way that companies could start to communicate more meaningfully with consumers when they're talking about the sustainable attributes of products. One of the best parts about going to Portland State University was that I have this amazing athletic and outdoor industry certificate program, and many professionals are A, willing to come and teach class, and B, give insight, which was able to help me a lot throughout this research. Eventually, I was able to conduct a survey of a dozen different professionals from different organizations and get their perspective about what they're doing within their companies as far as corporate social responsibility goes, what their competitors are doing, and then what their consumers are thinking about it. This survey helped my research because I was able to categorize the different aspects of innovation between materials, supply chain, and social and ethical compliance, and also left me with a resounding and consistent answer about consumers, saying that consumers probably are not aware enough of these sustainability innovations. Given that they're not aware, I wanted to first find out if consumers care at all. I went through 3 iterations of testing consumer-facing surveys to determine what people were thinking about different aspects of sustainability. My first survey was very small in sample size and tested as a pilot to see if there was general preference for sustainability. The students who took this survey were between 19 and 38 years old, and out of the 33 initially who took this, 32 of them ended up having general preference for sustainability. We determined this preference through an A/B test, where consumers and respondents were given 2 options of products. One was a general base version of the product that had a description from the company website, and the other was a description that included some amount of sustainability innovation within it. Once I established that there was general preference for sustainability, thanks from that first survey, I moved to a larger survey with over 100 respondents to start investigating what consumers thought about the different aspects of innovation between different categories. These categories, as I mentioned, were based off of what the industry was telling me through the survey, as well as diving through corporate social responsibility reports from the industry. I'm going to go ahead and overview some of the insights from the second survey, which ended up leading to some emergent research questions, which I tested in my final national survey, which we're going to discuss in just a minute here. So, one of the first big insights that I was able to pull from my research was in the comparison between different aspects of material innovations. We looked at durability as a function of sustainability to increase product life and let consumers buy less over the course of time, as well as materials that are generally more environmentally friendly. Durability was, of course, preferred significantly in direct comparisons, and even when externalities were introduced, which meant that if a consumer or a respondent would be choosing durability, there would be a loss of innovation in another place, they were still choosing durability consistently. One of the important factors that emerged as a moderator for respondents' preference was environmental sensitivity. We adapted an environmental sensitivity scale from a paper that was cited over 300 times to determine what consumers and where they kind of were as to their preference for the environment. And the lower a respondent's environmental sensitivity was, the more they preferred durability, especially when one of those externalities was introduced. This made a lot of sense to us, as if a consumer is mostly focused on having a product last a long time, they're not necessarily looking at the innovation as a whole, they simply want to see a long product life. Durability also appeared to moderate preference between the different innovation categories I mentioned. Higher durability preference led to more preference and higher preference for material innovations, while lower preference for durability meant that consumers were looking for innovations within supply chain. This was interesting because supply chain was seen to have more impact throughout the respondents' preferences. And there's a clear distinction that durability can have a high impact on sustainability by increasing product life, but supply chain innovation can have a significant impact for the overall environmental benefits that a product can offer. Environmental sensitivity was again important for evaluating preference for different categories. Any innovation that consumers were tested on was significantly preferred when their environmental sensitivity was higher. And then to evaluate if there was significant difference in preference for material versus supply chain innovations, we utilize an impact rating scale. For example, if a product was given a 25 score for materials innovation versus a 75 score with supply chain innovation, consumers almost always picked the score that had a higher number. However, the interesting findings came when the impact ratings stayed the same. When the impact ratings for both materials and supply chain were low, material innovations ended up being preferred, which we would infer means that consumers are also looking for more preference for durability within that. However, when the impact ratings for material and supply chain are high, supply chain innovations ended up being preferred, potentially meaning that those consumers are less concerned about durability and more concerned about the environmental benefits that the product is offering. The final insight that I'd like to discuss is about ethical innovation. Ethical innovation, when compared against nothing else, was the most preferred. Consumers across all different environmental sensitivities, preferences for different product types, preferred ethical innovation more than anything else. The interesting conflict that emerged was when ethics introduced an externality. And environmental sensitivity was what was moderating the preference for ethics versus an externality. The more sensitive respondents cared about seeing innovation within the environment, within supply chain, more than within ethics. However, these respondents were also the ones who were most likely to pick ethical innovation when this was compared versus nothing else. So, given some of these findings, I'd like to open up this discussion a little bit to our panelists here. And I'd like to first ask if they wouldn't mind giving a little bit of insight about what their roles are within their companies and how they're focused on sustainable innovation within there, and if they have any general insight into what consumers are thinking within their processes.
Okay, is the mic on? Yes. I'm Jamie Bainbridge. I work for a startup company in the Bay Area called Threads. We are a biotech company making a spider silk protein using a fermentation process. So now that you've wrapped your head around that, we are this way of making things through biotechnology has some significant sustainability attributes over other methods of producing the things we use every day. It's got completely renewable inputs. It's incredibly flexible as to what you can do with it and what kind of fiber we can create. It uses less chemistry overall because we can engineer attributes into the fiber, and it's a protein, so it degrades at end of life. So that's kind of what we do in a nutshell.
Am I on? Can you hear me?
No.
Good morning. My name's Borg Norum. I'm with Columbia Sportswear Company. I've been there about 10 years now. It's been a crazy ride. I'm a director of global product compliance and green chemistry, sort of couched within the overall corporate responsibility department in our company. And we're focused on a whole host of things, everything touching product in terms of materials that are going in, to the full life cycle of the product, to as you're talking about ethical, I think we would call maybe social innovations where we're focused more on the employees in our facilities, our our supply chain, the communities where we do business, and also to a degree looking at sort of what the future standards are and how we measure ourselves against that. So deep involvement with the OIA, as mentioned by Jennifer. We're founding members of the SAC, Sustainable Apparel Coalition, as well. We use Higg Index to kind of leverage and measure some of our impacts. So we're kind of in deep. I'm also a Portland State alumni. I graduated from the MBA program several years back. I don't know if you knew that, Jennifer, but so that's a little bit about me. I don't know if you have specific questions.
Yeah, thank you so much for those intros. So the first thing I kind of wanted to focus on, you touched on supply chain a little bit, and my research was clearly describing that consumers are finding supply chain innovations to be a little bit more impactful. And I'm curious about how you guys see your supply chain innovations connecting with any consumers in particular, and if you guys focus on trying to explain any of these innovations within your companies to consumers in general.
Sure. I mean, I think, in our conversation leading up to this, some of the, things we've had a very strong social compliance program for many years. I mean, that's obviously looking at the health and safety of workers, everything from, wages to child labor and so forth. But I think what we've seen over the last, maybe 8-10 years at Columbia is, opportunities to engage the communities and, where we're doing business. So that may be in our supply chain, it might be, in the markets where we sell our products. And you kind of asked for some specifics around, some things that we're doing that are, specifically tied to those communities and the supply chain. And I think we certainly we're looking at some of the same data that you are, and I commend you for your research. It's, valuable to us as an industry to guide where we go with our product and our innovations. But I think, one thing that was a bit of a surprise to me, most of my focus is tied to product, but we've done some what I think are fairly small, programs with our supply chain where we partnered with our suppliers, and directly trying to impact the communities. And what we've seen in terms of consumer feedback is, in some cases, as opposed to a product level sustainability attribute, recycled material, blue sign and so forth, which is is a product level option that a consumer can buy, that those are very meaningful programs. And as an example, we partnered in 2016 with Planet Water, and we looked at water as a sort of key thread in terms of how we look at the impacts that we have in our supply chain. And some of the things that came up in our research around health and access to clean drinking water led us to partner with Planet Water. And 2016 we picked a community in Vietnam and built a water tower that delivers clean drinking water to a community. Partnered with one of our manufacturers, a factory in Vietnam, which, in a sense, it's bringing us together closer to our manufacturer. It's bringing us close to the community and the workers and the people directly in that community. And so basically the way it works is, it's a small financial commitment where, it's $15,000 to build a single water tower, and it delivers, clean drinking water into perpetuity. It requires some maintenance, and the filtration would require, replacing some of the filters I think after 3 years. But for $15,000, the impact to the communities where we do business is significant. So, I believe the leading cause of hospitalization in Southeast Asia is due to waterborne illness. So if you think strictly from a business perspective, if we're looking at supply chain continuity and how do we keep our factories producing our goods, we have an interest in the workers and their health. So in terms of absenteeism and the direct impact to the workers in the factories, these are the kinds of things that are pretty basic, but so there's a clear business interest, but then it's bringing us closer to the communities and driving at some of the other things that we're trying to achieve. So feedback has been overwhelming. I think we, some of our team, CR team, documented the building of some of these towers. We've committed to, I think by the end of this year, we'll have built a total of 8 towers, so both in Vietnam and India. We did a little documentary video, just used our internal PR and marketing teams to document one of the projects and put it on YouTube. I think we've, at this point I checked just a few days ago, we're talking about 750,000 views on a video with pretty minimal cost. So we've even compared that to some of the kind of traditional marketing spend, and just unbelievable return for not a lot of cost. So it's just an example. You're asking me to talk to the social side, and
Perfect.
I don't know if that answers some of your questions.
That was great. Thank you so much, Borg. And the next kind of thing I wanted to transition into a little bit was when I was talking about durability and consumer significant preference for durability. Jamie works with Bolt Threads, and her job, which she was just talking to me, is a lot of communicating between different groups of scientists as they're developing new materials. That's obviously a very supply chain intensive focus, but the end result is a new and innovative material that they're working on. And I was curious if you could maybe highlight any insights about your process with communicating between supply chain and materials, and if you have any general insight about what consumers are responding to in particular within either.
Yeah, well, we don't have any consumers yet as such. We're at a very different point in our maturity than Columbia Sportswear for sure. So we're beginning to scale up our process and make it commercial, and as we do, we're starting to talk to supply chain partners. And so we have this unique position, unique to what I've ever done, where we have an opportunity to actually do things right the first time and really take into consideration durability of product, and is this a supply chain partner that is going to be working in an ethical manner. And so durability is one of the things that our product can do well, and we have a chance to really build product that will last a long time. And to me, that durability it used to be a given for the products we bought. I remember my parents owning our furniture for my whole life. Imagine that now. So it used to be built in, and then at some point along the way, I think the American consumer sort of discarded it, and now you're starting to see it come back around again. And when you talk to a consumer and you ask them directly, is durability important? Yes, it is. So it is something that we definitely are focusing on at all the levels of our supply chain, our future supply chain.
Yeah, and I think that highlights a very interesting piece, which I might ask you to elaborate on a little bit more. Often within my research, I was looking at durability as you're picking durability or you're picking environmental sustainability, and I think that Bolt Threads is finally uniquely positioned to encompass both durability and sustainability within a single material. Do you have any insight as to if a consumer would only be responsive for durability, or do you think that they're going to be glad that you can encompass all environmental environmental benefits and durability within a single product?
Yeah. He asks really hard questions. I think our product will definitely sit at the upper end of the market, and when you produce a product that's at a premium price, the consumer wants value, and one of those built-in values is durability. I think with our product, they're obviously drawn to it for innovational reasons, but innovation without durability doesn't mean anything. So it kind of goes hand in hand with the market that we're trying to pursue. I hope that we get both of them in there. I would hate to have to make a choice.
It's a great answer, thank you. And I also wanted to look a little bit at some of the industry standardization for sustainability right now. We've seen a lot of focus recently on things like the Higg Index through the Sustainable Working Group, and I know that Jamie is significantly involved, and Borg will probably have some insight as well. And I was curious to see if you guys might have any intuition as to whether consumers will respond differently to any different aspects of the scores that are being developed, and if you think that there's a specific part of the scores that consumers might care enough about. Or is it just the fact that we're getting started and doing something going to be enough for a lot of people?
Yeah, well, within the Sustainability Working Group, when we started working on trying to come up with an index to describe product attributes in this realm, there was a lot of discussion as to whether this should be a consumer-facing thing. The way we've pursued it up until now, and the way the Higg Index is pursuing it, is that we've got to get our tool in order before it would ever go to be a public consumer-facing rating system. So at this point, it's still business to business, but that doesn't mean that brands aren't talking about their sustainable attributes. And I think the work that we've all done there informs us to be able to talk to the consumer in a much more informed way than we could before. I'm sure you have something to add on that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I remember going back to the early days with, sort of bringing together tools from the industry and trying to, understand what we're trying to get to at the end. And it was entirely focused on a consumer-facing label, and particularly a score, as you mentioned, which would give an indication of how sustainable a product is. And I think that that's something that's still on the horizon. But I think what we've seen is that the expectations are from consumers that you're already doing a lot of the basic things. So if it's basic compliance, eliminating toxic substances from product to social or a whole host of energy, waste, water, some of those expectations are already there, and there's a lot of work in between that kind of basic level. And in a supply chain like Columbia's, we have hundreds and hundreds of suppliers, some of which we have very strong relationships, and we can influence sort of where they're at along that spectrum. We clearly can make product decisions. I mean, we're selecting materials based on our life cycle approach, and certainly looking at sustainability attributes. But how you sum that all up at the end and sort of create some value for a consumer is still not totally clear. In some cases, we're looking at where, to your points about social and sort of ethical side of business, people, they want to see some measure of those outputs as well, and not strictly just the things that we're all familiar with. It's blue sign, it's recycled, it's sustainably harvested, it's so I think we'll get there eventually. And I think what I'm very hopeful, given the early days where we all had different ways of measuring our impacts, and I think that HIG is probably, I think, even outside of apparel, textile, footwear, is probably the best example where you're seeing industry collaboration to come together and figure out how we go about measurement.
Yeah, and I think what's incumbent on us in this work is to make this a subject that consumers can wrap their heads around. It's too complicated right now, and they think they've done the right thing only to find out that somebody tells them they've done the wrong thing. So that simplicity is what I'd like to see us really drive for, to be able to, and as things get more and more normalized, as we take care of these problems and they become a given, then we're able to talk about things in a more simple way. And I think that's really, really important right now.
That's awesome. And so my next question was going to be how you think the index will develop as consumers become more and more aware. And I think that's great insight to hear that as consumers do become more aware, a simpler and clearer tool will certainly be a great answer for them. I don't know if I have any more direct questions right now. I did want to open this up to the audience and even the panelists. If you guys have any questions for me, or if anyone from the audience has questions that we could answer, I'd love to see if we could open up any more discussion here today.
I do have one question for you before we throw it out there. In your research, did you find that there is a shift happening in consumer behavior that you could quantify? And if so, sort of how fast is it happening?
I don't know if I can give you a great answer as to if I can quantify how fast that shift is happening.
Okay, qualify.
Qualify, yes. I did a significant amount of research into some of the younger consumer groups right now who are starting to move into spending power. And there was a lot of evidence, as I mentioned earlier, that millennials and Generation Zs are starting to overcome the price barrier, which has plagued sustainability for a really long time. So I do think that we'll be seeing a significant shift from my perspective within the next 5 to 10 years. But this is a slow-moving process, and as people become more aware about sustainability and aware about the different attributes that products can offer and how the companies are actually working to make the environment a better place rather than degrading it, I think that shift will start to speed up. But that's an excellent question. I'm not sure I can give you a solid qualifying answer on that. Are there any questions from the audience? Yes. So she was asking about the regional shifts, or if there's any difference in regional preference for sustainability. She mentioned that a lot of us are located here on the West Coast. A lot of people are more environmentally sensitive here versus other parts of the country. I think that's an excellent question to ask, and that's something that I'm looking to investigate in some future research, actually. Those demographics of preferences for sustainability are certainly vital, and that's something that I think is a little bit of a limiting factor for my research, to be honest with you. Some of my initial studies were performed in Portland, but my last national survey was conducted around the nation, and there wasn't any significant differences that I noticed between people around the nation, but I do think that's a very valid avenue of research for us to consider for the future, absolutely.
Yeah, so Columbia Sportswear, we're global. We're in about 100 different countries around the world, and I think that historically there were some significant differences, I think, between markets, and some still, but I think we're seeing that kind of those gaps close. I mean, maybe examples for if you're familiar with RDS, Responsible Down Standard, we committed in 2016, and conversations with our regional senior management, Japan and Korea and China, all very important markets for us, that sort of sentiments of, I guess in maybe sort of consumer relationships with animals and animal welfare is very different in different parts of the world. And we started off with, kind of the closed door from our Japan management, and they were like, yeah, this isn't resonating with, Japanese consumer. It's not important. In fact, there's, a lot of misconceptions around, force feeding and a whole host of things in Japan. And we've seen that over the last couple of years it's really shifted, where they're saying, well, now we have demand for it. People are asking about it. So same thing with Blue Sign and a number of other things that we're doing in the market. We approach most things globally, so you're seeing product similarly around the world in terms of the either sustainability attributes, materials, and so forth. But I think in China has been a surprise too, where you're, historically not a lot of pressure. It tends to be, is it safe, basic consumer level, safety, price concerns, but then, we're seeing a lot of asks around sustainability.
Thank you. And there's a hand up in the back, or maybe we'll go up front first.
Well, I've straddled the outdoor industry and the fashion industry for years, and I'm very proud of the outdoor industry because it's really led, and I'm seeing the fashion industry now really embrace and drive sustainability and better practices. So I can tell you, in my world in New York and the fashion industry is really driving this now, and I really think that they've been looking at the outdoor industry. So I think it's just a snowball. It's really inspiring to see how these industries are playing off of one another. So I think it's very exciting.
Yeah, I've done a lot of work recently in the fashion industry. We have a partnership with Stella McCartney, and I've spoken with a lot of groups in the fashion industry, and it's so gratifying for those of us who've been at this for a long, long time now to be seeing that sector finally embracing things. And I've had several talks with OIA people in the last couple of days about outreach into that industry, because we've got a lot of experience now with it, and we hope to exactly. Eileen Fisher, fabulous company, but yeah, it's great. It's really taking hold.
Thank you. And I think we have a question in the back.
Yes, I'm curious about more of the B2B aspect. So could you describe how a company like Columbia is taking into account sustainability from its RM suppliers?
Sure. So I think the good thing about, I think maybe I can't speak for all of outdoor industry certainly, but the strength in our partnerships with our vendors. In some cases, we've been working with some of the partners that we have for 20 plus years. So that gives us a lot of opportunity to grow together, for us to select strategic partners that share the same values that we do. I don't know if that, for example, you're bringing up fashion industry, that's some of the struggle they may have where they're moving from, one vendor to the next, and you don't have that, continuity. So in terms of identifying our strategic partners, there's a number of different things that we're looking at. It's partly commitments to their local communities. It's their commitments in terms of energy, waste, and water management. It's, commitments on chemicals management, Blue Sign, and so forth. So we've certainly structured a lot of those kind of core values into our engagement with our vendors. And I think, honestly, that, we're only as good as our supplier partners are. There's no way we can do it alone as brands. We desperately need the mills and factories to share those same values because the impacts are significant out there in manufacturing countries.
Yeah, up here in the front.
Retail, kind of born-again retail kid. I find consumers don't give a crap most of the time. Ski industry, they come in, they want it fast, they need it, they don't read the hang tags, they go in the trash. All the work we do on the front end does not get acknowledged by the consumer. Look at our government. It just isn't impacting the mass market as much as I would love to see it. We all love it, we all want it, but do our consumers really care? Some do. In the outdoor industry, yes, but not all parts. So all the work you do is fantastic and the information is so important, but if it's on a little hang tag, it goes in the trash or in the recycle bin if we promote that. It's just really challenging from the retail front line to, you get clinicked, you know your product, you know the down stories and this, that, and the other, but it just doesn't resonate with people on vacation. It sadly doesn't resonate. You try, you want to teach them. You're following out the door. Hey, did you know it does this? No.
Do you care why they bought it? They liked the product and they bought a good product. That's a great thing.
Yeah, brand
But
consciousness is important.
Right.
But in general, 9 out of 10 don't care.
I think for us, I mean, there's a lot we do whether the consumer cares or not. And so, yeah, I think, I mean, and that's one thing in terms of outdoor industry. We have a lot of expectations that consumers do care. There's certainly interest in in having an outdoors in the future. So I mean that's something that keeps us doing the work that we do. But there's a lot that we do regardless of whether the consumer expects it or not. And sometimes we're not very good at telling those stories. I think for our brands, we've turned a corner where we're starting to get a demand from, whether it's B2B or whether it's, consumers, e-com, social media. So, we're having to learn how to tell stories about things that we just did for the sake of, doing the right thing. So that's not every brand for sure, but yeah, I don't think it's necessarily all about consumer, and that's why, to Ethan's research, you're finding that, maybe it isn't coming down to a selection of a product, and that's the purchase decision.
Yeah, I think that's a very valid point as well. I think your point on brand consciousness hits it right on the head. There's certainly those consumers who are going to the brands that they know that are innovating in a meaningful way because they're doing that, but that's not a general expectation that everybody's going to have. So that's an excellent point to hit right on the head. If we don't have any more questions, well, let's do one more question here.
Oh, thank you. This question is for Borg Norum. And first of all, I want to just speak. I think it's tremendous what you're doing in Vietnam on the water, purification, community outreach with your partnership community. What's the future of those kinds of projects for Columbia in other source places maybe? Or whether it's water or other things, what's the future of that for you guys?
That's a good question. I mean, I think what we've, the way we've been organized in terms of sustainability is, historically we do a lot of different things and maybe don't get the value out of it by connecting them together. So, for example, water, in terms of storytelling and sort of creating value for a consumer, we're looking where the opportunities are, whether it's reducing, water usage in dye process for textiles or, conservation or other areas where we can tell a real, a real story across a number of different, things that we're doing, but specific to water. So that's, it's one of the kind of key, the sort of lenses that we're looking through and how we've organized. I think certainly I see, other, continuing the Planet Water Project has been a huge success. I think, and we're gauging that by the feedback we're getting from consumers and by, our customers as well. So hopefully more of that. It's hard to know beyond the things that we're doing today, but yeah.
Kudos on the 750,000 views. That's fairly significant.
Did you view it? Were you one of those? Okay.
One more quick question here. We've been talking a lot about sustainability really on the front end of the product development and bringing it to the consumer. How much does the consumer focus on the front end, like first of life versus end of life, and what sustainability looks like when the product is end of life?
I think that's an excellent question, and it's a difficult one to answer, I would say. Part of what my research is examining is exactly that, as to whether consumers are seeing impact at the front end at the time of purchase, or if they're looking at the impact at the end of life. And that's part of why I decided to kind of segment the innovations between materials, supply chain, and ethical and social compliance. Excuse me. As consumers become more aware of the supply chain and the value that it's creating, I believe that they will start to consider more of the end of life of the product because they see where things are coming from. But at the same time, it's very difficult for someone to be willing to buy something knowing that the end of life is potentially designed to, I'm trying to find the right words to say here, knowing that the product is designed to be thrown away. And if companies are able to communicate value that the end of life is meaningful, or it's able to be recycled, the loop can be closed, there could be big differences in preference, I think. So.
Thanks.
Yeah, and so I want to say thank you so much to everyone for coming out today. I want to end with a very quick call to action for all of you. If you have general feedback about any of my research, I have 2 links up here on the screen. The top link is where you can submit general comments about the discussion that we had today. And the second link is actually an industry survey that you can take if you want to give me some input for any future research that I'm performing. I'd love to hear any of your feedback. My email and phone number are right at the bottom there, and so is Jennifer's if you guys have any questions or comments about PSU's programs. And thank you so much to Borg and Jamie for sitting up here with me today, and OR for giving us this platform. So appreciate you guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.